Welcome to Policy Matters. Our goal is to keep you informed about the upcoming election, how it affects you, and why it matters. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Merrifield Wilson. Starting off, we have breaking news. In what appears to be a second assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump took place Sunday afternoon. Trump says he's safe and no one is hurt. The incident took place at his golf course in West Palm Beach, Florida. The Secret Service says agents shot at a suspected gunman who was a few hundred yards away from the former president at Trump International Golf Club. Law enforcement sources identify a person detained as 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth. Arrest records suggest he has a history with firearms and law enforcement run-ins. Investigators recovered an AK-47 style rifle and a camera from the scene. Starting off with our first headline, early voting in Indiana begins in 2 weeks and Election Day is just 7 weeks away. Voting centers in Marion County will be available on Election Day, which allow voters to participate in the election by casting their ballot at any one of the locations across the county. Pennsylvania began early voting yesterday, and several other states will begin early voting this month. Early voting at the Indianapolis City County building starts on Tuesday, October 8th, and ends on Monday, November 4th at 12 p.m. Additional early voting satellite sites will operate October 26th through November 3rd, 2024. Today is September 17th, which makes it National Constitution Day. This day marks the adoption of the U.S. Constitution and celebrates the rights and responsibilities it established. This foundational document created a system of checks and balances between the federal government and the states while safeguarding individual liberties. The Bill of Rights soon followed, guaranteeing freedoms like speech, religion, and assembly, and ensuring the federal government could not overreach. These documents have guided the U.S. and influenced democratic systems worldwide. Today also marks 1 week since our first and perhaps only presidential debate of this election cycle. For 90 minutes, former President Donald Trump, representing the Republican Party, and Vice President Kamala Harris of the Democratic Party sparred off in a very entertaining and educational debate. These moments are imperative for voters to get a better sense of how the candidates feel, where they stand on issues, and what important points they would do if elected as president. And this is a great point for me to welcome Levi as we talk today about the debate. And Levi, I know you had the opportunity to watch the debate last Tuesday. What were some of your big takeaways?
First of all, happy Constitutional Day, Professor. But yeah, that debate was a roller coaster. I really enjoyed it. It was so fun to watch. There were a lot of interesting moments that I can't wait to get into it with. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, that there was a lot of conversation online about how the moderators fact-checked the former president. Being as you moderated multiple debates in the past, what do you think, how do you perceive the moderators? Do you think they did the right thing? What's your thoughts on it?
Well, I'd start off by saying the moderators were much more engaged in this ABC debate than what we saw in the CNN debate back in June. And I think that was intentional because a lot of people complained that candidates would just go on and say things and there was no fact checking. There was no response. I will say, though, I'm empathetic to a moderator that has to be responsible for timing, asking questions, making sure both candidates are heard. So I thought these moderators did a good job. Now, it is fair, and I know we'll be able to look at this a little bit later in the show, they fact-check one candidate much more often than the other candidate. And I think that is very challenging. But also sometimes it's the magnitude of the dishonesty, the frequency of the lies, how outrageous they are, and quite frankly, how quickly they are to be able to be fact-checked.
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point that as a moderator, you want to appear to be as neutral as possible.
Absolutely.
And I think that the moderators, in an attempt to appear more neutral, maybe we should have tried to maybe fact-check Harris, even if it was a point that maybe you could have said it was a half-truth. But I think it would have gone a long way for the moderators to show their neutrality to potentially try to fact check it. But what you said, it's like the window. If you open it, right, all of it's going to flood in. And how much do you fact check then? How much do you not fact check? So,
well, I think we'll be able to see in the October 1st vice presidential debate just how active those moderators are. Now, one last thing I wanted to ask about, what do you think about the Taylor Swift endorsement?
oh man, I'll say, first of all, I think that it is huge, regardless of what anyone says. And I think that we saw a 500% increase in voter registration following that endorsement, which came right after the debate. So it makes it kind of tough to, really pinpoint, was it the debate or was it the Swift endorsement that drove that? But if I had to choose any celebrity in the world to endorse me as a president, I think I would definitely choose Taylor Swift.
Well, hopefully she's watching and she'll put that in the
Right,
back of her mind. File it away for Levi
exactly.
Alt for president.
Yes. She's going to have it written down somewhere. Oh, there's the day.
I'm interested to see the magnitude that it has. And as you pointed out, I thought the timing was quite frankly not the best. Had she come out with the endorsement this week, actually, that would take a lot of the political air out of the room. But when everyone's talking about the debate, to just drop that endorsement in that same evening, I don't think gets quite the same amount of attention.
Exactly. With somebody of her prevalence in media, and especially, like you said, if you really wanted to maximize it, let's say there's a negative story that comes out on Harris, or whatever the case might be, you could, not to try, to coordinate it per se, but there could have been maybe a better time to maximize the effect of your endorsement. Because we're now, almost 2 months, a month and a half out from the election. Yeah. I wonder how many voters will remember Swift's endorsement when either, even if they register now, they may register, but then forget to vote. So it's out of the conscious a little bit. What do you think? Do you think the endorsement will have any effect on the election? Do you think it'll matter at all?
I think this one does. And generally, when we talk about the impact of endorsements, we'd say how important the person is perceived to be. And that's interesting because Taylor Swift is a household name, albeit not involved in politics, but she is someone that people know, right? And they probably have strong opinions of. So I think that important parts matters. The connection to politics itself is the one thing that I have a question mark on. And so she's been active in politics before, even though she doesn't serve an elected office. I'm curious to see, where does that impact matter? So typically Democrats have been more successful with younger voters, and I would suspect that's where Swift kind of overlaps. But as a middle-aged white female voter, that soccer mom vote, which is a really large part of the electorate, would Swift's endorsement make an impact there? I grew up listening to Taylor Swift in my late college and graduate school years, so I was certainly familiar with her. That's where I see that opportunity to really make a difference in terms of election outcome, and that's the thing I'd be really curious to see.
And especially with such a close race, even if Swift maybe changes the minds or gets maybe a few voters out to cast the ballot that wouldn't otherwise, that could make the world of difference in an election and margins like we are today. So I think that it's probably going to matter, more likely than not. And that, especially in really close swing states like Georgia, you have even some polls, Tennessee is getting a little bit closer, North Carolina. I think that maybe just a couple hundred votes here and there could swing it. And I think that Swift's endorsement has and could carry that. So definitely a big endorsement coming from Taylor Swift. And it's going to have an effect, more likely than not.
Absolutely. And time, of course, will tell.
Yeah.
Well, for today's history lesson, we'll be diving into the history of the Constitution and National Voter Registration Day. To start off, let's deep dive into how exactly the Constitution came to be. The American colonists issued the Declaration of Independence in 1776, asserting unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. After the Revolutionary War, the Articles of Confederation were established to create a Congress with limited powers and sovereign states. However, this system had drawbacks, including disjointed state economies. The Constitutional Convention was then held to form a federal government strong enough to maintain order between the states and other countries while protecting the liberties for each state. The U.S. Constitution de-alienated powers for the federal government, reserving for the states and concurrent powers for both to address concerns about government overreach. The Bill of Rights was ratified, ensuring fundamental freedoms. These foundational documents intricately balanced power and liberty, serving as a framework guiding the United States and other democratic systems worldwide.
Moving on to National Voter Registration Day. Some may ask, why is it necessary to register? Why can't I just show up with my ID and cast my ballot? Well, one reason you should register early is because it allows officials to maintain accurate records of who can vote and avoid delays due to double counting, confusion, or conflict on Election Day. Fraud is one of the hot topics regarding counting the votes accurately and swiftly on November 5th. Taking a look back at the history of voting rights in America, at our founding, voting was explicitly reserved for white males who owned property. But many constitutional amendments later, that expanded that right over the years. The 15th Amendment passed during Reconstruction, and which prohibited denying the right to vote based on race, allowing black men to vote. The 19th Amendment, ratified in 1920, extended this to white women. However, many southern states enacted discriminatory practices like literacy tests and poll taxes to suppress black voters. It wasn't until the 24th Amendment, which abolished the poll tax, that allowed for an increased participation in our elections.
We're going to switch gears now and discuss what everyone's been talking about, the presidential debate that happened last week. And I think probably the most infamous clip and outtake was a conversation about cats and dogs. Let's go ahead and take a look here.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
And Levi, I have to say, cats and dogs being eaten was not on my bingo card. I don't know, did you have this one?
That was definitely not on my bingo sheet either, Professor. I had some other, out of left field ones, but definitely not eating cats and dogs on my list.
I think one of the things that's really difficult about this kind of comment is just how funny it seems at the time, very flippant, right? But the former president's remarks did cause a lot of chaos and uproar, threats of violence and concern of things going on in Springfield, Ohio. So not only just having this moment on stage and really a laughable moment for us later on, but certainly a concern in terms of what happens after the debate.
The real world impact of comments that politicians, or anyone for that matter, can have on the real world. And like you said, there was bomb threats being called in Springfield. There was some violence, I think, going on very sparsely. And it's just sad to see how that type of rhetoric can throw a community into the mainstream like that, when really they're just trying to be everyday people trying to live their life.
Another important clip we have here talks about the driving crime rate in the United States. Let's take a look.
Crime here is up and through the roof, despite their fraudulent statements that they made.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country.
Now, this is something that I think is important. There's the perception of crime and the actual statistics making a difference here. We know that crime will drive people to vote, and it's also a major concern for many American voters.
Yeah, and I think it's important to highlight the perception and then the reality of crime. And I think Trump definitely is trying to associate Biden with an increased level of crime, because then he can pitch to his supporters, hey, crime was down under me, despite when you had the George Floyd riots and everything, the BLM riots and stuff going on, and the protests associated with that.
Now, Donald Trump wasn't the only person who had falsehoods at the debate. Let's watch another clip here where Vice President Kamala Harris made an inaccurate statement.
And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world. The first time this century. What? But let's understand.
So where the fuck are we right now?
I think that clip says it all, quite frankly. And the point for this particular part, she wasn't pressed to say that. I don't think she had to give that response. Probably true for any of these falsehoods in a debate, but there should be a way you can artfully address the question and be both accurate, but still portray yourself, your policies, your goal in a positive light.
In a true politician fashion, should leave enough wriggle room, say, oh, maybe I said that, but I didn't say that. But yeah, clearly an example of Harris maybe spreading the truth out a little bit. This week, we wanted to get students' perspectives on who they are voting for.
Kamala Harris.
Probably Kamala.
Harris, for sure.
Kamala.
I'd say personally that Kamala won the debate.
I think Donald Trump won.
I think Kamala probably won it.
Kamala.
I think Kamala Harris won.
In my opinion, I chose to turn off television.
Kamala.
It's quite frankly, it's Donald Trump. All the way.
I think she kind of just stumbled around him a lot.
Just because I don't think she was put on that big of a stage, but I think we knew what Trump was going to do.
Because Kamala seemed more well prepared for the debate more than Trump was.
So most of his opinions or his statements just weren't really backed up and or valid. So I would give the win to Kamala for sure.
I don't think either of them looked all that great, to be honest.
I think that was her tactic when she was going there. She was just baiting him. At one point, she had this man screaming, "They're eating cats," and like he wasn't focused at all on the debate and the actual what they had to present as a party.
She gives accurate information.
She had really clear points.
I feel like she answered some of the questions better, and the debate was just structured more to her. Because I feel like some of the questions she was able to answer easier.
Why did you choose to turn off the television?
It's going to come down to me actually looking down at both of their policies for the upcoming election instead of just listening to them talk about it.
Quite frankly, I wiped the floor with Kamala. She did not do very well. I thought I dominated. You look at the clips and you see that they're all talking about me because, quite frankly, they're eating the dogs. Lots of eating, so many dogs. Very good, very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for tuning in and listening to Policy Matters. Don't forget, in addition to Constitution Day, today is voter registration day. Make sure you're registered to vote so you can have your voice heard on November 5th.